Welcome, deep divers, to another exploration into the fascinating complexities of human experience. Today, we're diving headfirst into something profoundly personal, something we all hold deeply ingrained ideas about: childhood. We all carry these notions of what childhood should be, don't we? Often, those ideas are a direct reflection of our own upbringing, our own memories, our own struggles and triumphs as children, or indeed, as parents ourselves. But what if we told you that the very concept of childhood itself, how we perceive it, how we understand a child's role in society, and perhaps most critically, how we parent, has shifted dramatically over centuries, often in ways that are surprising, even contradictory, and sometimes, frankly, a little bizarre?
Mm.
That's right. This deep dive is going to meticulously unpack the rich, sometimes contentious, and always evolving history of how children have been understood, raised, and even defined across different cultures and through the relentless march of time. We're going to embark on a journey that explores the earliest human approaches to child rearing, delve into the incredible variations we've observed across vastly different cultures, and ultimately grapple with the very real, often intense, modern pressures shaping families today. It's a story far more complex and nuanced than the nostalgic images we often hold. To guide us through this intricate landscape, we've pulled insights from a truly fascinating stack of sources today. We're talking about rigorous anthropological texts that challenge our assumptions about human universals, detailed historical accounts of education and parenting practices that might genuinely make your jaw drop, and even contemporary online discussions straight from parents themselves, revealing both cutting edge scientific findings and the raw, lived experiences of raising kids in the 21st century. It's a blend that offers both the academic rigor and the relatable everyday realities. Our mission today is a clear one: to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from this incredibly diverse material. We aim to offer you a genuine shortcut to being well informed about the complex, often perplexing, but always vital journey of childhood. We want you to gain a richer understanding of not just what parenting choices are being made today, but critically, why they're being made, what historical precedents or cultural influences might be at play, and what the broader implications are for both children and society. So prepare to have your preconceptions challenged, and let's embark on this remarkable journey. To truly grasp where we are in the evolution of childhood and parenting, we absolutely have to understand where we've been, and that means going way, way back. Far beyond the advent of formal schooling or even formalized parenting advice. It makes me wonder, how fundamentally different was the process of learning and growing up for early humans, particularly in hunter-gatherer societies, compared to our highly structured modern world?
It's a profound thought, because if we look at human history on a grand, almost cosmic scale, the school system as we know it is merely a blink in time. It's a very recent invention. For hundreds of thousands of years, in what we broadly categorize as hunter-gatherer societies, that was the dominant human organizational model for most of our existence. Children didn't learn within the structured confines of classrooms, nor were they subjected to formal curricula or rigid schedules. Instead, their education was intrinsically woven into the very fabric of daily life. It happened primarily through unstructured, self-directed play and genuine, uninhibited exploration of their natural environment. And this wasn't just a byproduct of their lifestyle, it was recognized and actively fostered by the adults in these communities. Sources describe this approach as providing almost unlimited freedom for children. Adults in these societies understood play not as a mere pastime or a break from real learning, but as children's natural and frankly profoundly effective way of acquiring knowledge. It was how they developed crucial physical and cognitive skills, and how they came to understand their complex world. Imagine children learning about botany just by foraging alongside adults, or developing problem-solving skills through really elaborate games they made up, or understanding social dynamics through complex role-playing with their peers. This wasn't about formal lessons or strict pedagogical methods. It was organic and immersive learning process, driven by innate curiosity, direct sensory experience, and constant interaction with their environment and community. This way of life, while demanding sophisticated skills for survival, was often not labor-intensive in the same way modern societies are, which inherently allowed for this extensive, seemingly boundless freedom for children to learn and develop at their own pace.
That truly is a profound shift in perspective from our modern, often highly structured, and sometimes rigid approach to early childhood. It really makes you question many of our contemporary assumptions. So, when we talk about the most fundamental level infants in these ancient contexts, what did meeting their basic needs actually look like? How did those practices, like feeding or basic hygiene, compare to what we might typically imagine today with our specialized ergonomic swaddles, meticulously planned feeding schedules, and elaborate sanitized nurseries?
That's an excellent question, because the reality was starkly different. almost alien from modern Western norms, particularly when it came to infant care. We see practices that emphasize practicality and immediate responsiveness over elaborate equipment or rigid schedules. For instance, babies were often simply wrapped up in a cloth or clad in basic, easily adjustable tunics. The concept of specialized infant clothing with all its fasteners and layering was largely absent. It was replaced by simplicity and direct contact. Breastfeeding, which is often a point of detailed discussion and even anxiety in contemporary parenting, was, by all accounts, fundamentally on demand. This wasn't a scheduled activity, but an instinctive, continuous response to the infant's cues, occurring as frequently as the baby desired. This practice often continued for as long as they naturally could, which meant well beyond what's common in many Western societies today, potentially until the onset of teething or the natural introduction of soft, easily digestible cereal pastes as the child grew older. This long-term, unrestricted breastfeeding facilitated constant physical closeness and seemed to underpin a very different parent-child dynamic. And then there were hygiene practices that might seem quite bizarre or even unhygienic to us today. One notable example was an early form of toilet training known as holdout. This involves holding a child, often from a very young age, over a potty or a designated spot to encourage elimination, essentially anticipating their needs and helping them empty their bladder or bowels.
Hold out. Okay.
Yeah. While it might sound crude, it was an incredibly practical method that reduced the need for absorbent materials. And speaking of bizarre, one particularly peculiar, almost shocking example comes from ancient Greece. The physician Cyrannus, often cited as one of the earliest figures to offer detailed medical and parenting advice in the 2nd century AD, actually insisted on the practice of salting babies after birth.
Salting babies. Okay, this really makes you stop and think. Cyrannus, the ancient Greek physician, right? He's often put forward as one of the earliest examples of someone providing detailed expert parenting advice, influencing thought for centuries. And yes, you mentioned the peculiar advice about salting babies. He actually took it further, didn't he? Warning against colostrum, that vital first milk rich in antibodies.
Exactly, believing it was too thick or cheesy.
Instead, he recommended giving infants watered-down wine or honey.
Mm-hmm.
This truly underscores that while the idea of expert advice isn't new, the advice itself definitely changes in wild, sometimes alarming ways over time, doesn't it? It completely challenges our modern assumption that there's always been a universally understood, scientifically backed best practice for child rearing. It's a stark reminder that even our most deeply held common-sense parenting beliefs today are products of our time and culture, and they are just as likely to be viewed as bizarre by future generations.
Exactly. That's the profound insight here. It's not just about historical curiosities. It's a critical lens through which to view our own contemporary practices. And speaking of those historical shifts, what's truly fascinating is that even the very word parenting itself is a remarkably recent term in the English language. It only truly came into widespread usage in common parlance in the 1970s.
It's 70s, really?
Yeah. Prior to that, the common phrase was child rearing. That linguistic difference, seemingly subtle, actually reflects a much deeper societal truth. For the vast majority of human history, much of a child's care was often, by modern standards, outsourced.
Outsourced. How so?
Well, this outsourcing didn't always mean paid professionals, though that was common among the wealthy. It encompassed a broader network of care. Children might be primarily tended to by wet nurses, who would breastfeed infants other than their own,
Right.
by nannies or governesses, particularly in aristocratic households, by tutors for their education, or even more commonly by older siblings, extended family members like aunts, uncles, and grandparents, or by the broader community of a tribe or village. The nuclear family, as the singular isolated unit bearing almost sole responsibility for child rearing, is very much a modern construct. It's a relatively recent development in the human story.
Wow.
This historical perspective immediately prompts the question of what changed and why to shift us towards such intensive, individualized parental involvement.
So that completely reframes our understanding of the nuclear family's role. It means for centuries, childcare was a much more distributed communal effort. What then does this all mean for the significant shift we then see from this more hands-off, outsourced approach to parents becoming much more directly and intensely involved in every aspect of their children's lives? Who or what actually pushed for this more intensive, direct parental engagement, almost demanding it as a moral imperative?
This transition was a gradual but truly profound one, a slow-burning revolution, if you will, influenced by a confluence of philosophical shifts, changing economic realities, and evolving societal structures. The 17th and 18th centuries were pivotal, serving as a kind of intellectual crucible where new ideas about childhood began to ferment. Philosophers like John Locke in England and Jean-Jacques Rousseau in France began to articulate revolutionary ideas about the innate nature of children and, crucially, the importance of parental involvement in a child's upbringing and education.
Okay, Locke and Rousseau.
Yeah. Locke, with his concept of tabula rasa, the idea that a child is born as a blank slate, implicitly placed enormous responsibility on parents and educators to shake this malleable mind through carefully controlled experiences. He advocated for a rational, disciplined, yet gentle approach. Rousseau, on the other hand, proposed the concept of the noble savage, believing children were inherently good and uncorrupted by society, suggesting that education should allow their natural inclinations to unfold. His philosophical novel, Emile, or On Education, published in 1762, became an accidental but incredibly influential parenting manual for many, particularly in the European aristocracy and burgeoning middle classes.
An accidental parenting manual.
Right. The irony here, and it's the striking one, is that Rousseau himself, despite penning this influential treatise on education, famously gave every single one of his 5 children up to a foundling home shortly after their birth.
No.
Yes. His personal actions were in stark contrast to his philosophical pronouncements. Yet, his ideas took root, leading to some truly questionable and, by modern standards, even dangerous practices among those attempting to follow his philosophies. For instance, in pursuit of toughening up children and allowing them to be more natural, parents would send their offspring outside in winter with minimal or even no clothing, believing it would fortify their constitutions against illness.
Oh my goodness.
Even more extreme, there are historical accounts of people deliberately making loud noises, like shooting guns, near their children's heads, to habituate them to shocks and make them shockproof.
Shockproof. That's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
It was a literal, misguided attempt to build resilience. While Rousseau was advocating for a more natural upbringing and greater parental oversight in terms of moral and intellectual development, he certainly wasn't expecting parents to be changing diapers or engaging in the day-to-day intimate care that we associate with modern parenting. However, this philosophical nudge, combined with the earlier influence of Puritan beliefs, particularly strong in early America, began a long and complex transition. The Puritans, with their emphasis on individual moral responsibility and the shaping of a child's character through direct, hands-on raising, provided a religious imperative for intensive parental involvement. This laid the groundwork for the more direct, almost all-encompassing role parents are expected to play today, a concept that would have been utterly alien to most just a few centuries prior.
That's quite a trajectory. From communal care to philosophers advocating for direct involvement, albeit with some truly eyebrow-raising methods. Now, fast-forwarding through history a bit, let's land in the mid-20th century, a period often romanticized as the good old days for various reasons. What about the kind of parenting advice previous generations received then, particularly in the 1950s? We've seen some of those baby routines and discipline recommendations go viral recently, sparking a lot of shock and disbelief today. What did they actually recommend, and what was the underlying philosophy that made such practices seem acceptable?
The advice from the 1950s, particularly for infant and child care, indeed provides a stark contrast to modern practices and, as you noted, often elicits strong reactions from contemporary parents. For example, recommendations for infants included putting babies out of doors to sleep, sometimes even in seemingly harsh conditions like deep snow.
Outside, in the snow.
While this practice persists in some Nordic countries with specialized gear and cultural norms, in many Western societies today, it's generally seen as quite radical due to safety concerns like hypothermia or exposure. There was also the continued practice of holdout for early potty training, building on historical methods where infants would be held over a potty from a very young age to encourage early toilet use, often minimizing the need for diapers. This was driven by a philosophy of efficiency and early independence.
Okay, so efficiency was key.
Right, but perhaps more starkly, and certainly more controversially, a common belief endorsed by some influential parenting guides of the era was that a child who had been behaving in a truculent way may possibly profit from spanking. This wasn't merely suggested as a last resort. It was framed as a potentially beneficial method for instilling obedience. One particular case study often cited was a 3-year-old named Mary, who was spanked until she ceased making the nightly scene, with the clear disturbing implication being that this cessation was due to terror and compliance rather than understanding or emotional regulation.
Wow, that's grim.
It is. This type of advice extended to other behaviors, even suggesting physical punishment for a 4-year-old who stopped eating well, reinforcing a punitive approach to behavioral correction.
Okay.
And then there's the emotional aspect. Another piece of advice that seems profoundly counterintuitive and even damaging today was to don't give your baby too many cuddles.
No, really,
I
don't
think
cuddle too much.
Yes. This stemmed from a fear that excessive physical affection would spoil the child, make them overly dependent, or hinder their development of self-sufficiency. This is a radical departure from our current understanding of infant attachment theory, the critical role of physical affection and responsive caregiving in healthy brain development, and the principles of gentle, positive discipline. These mid-century guidelines reflect a period where strict scheduling, absolute obedience, emotional stoicism, and early self-sufficiency were prioritized, often at the expense of emotional connection, responsiveness, and what we now understand as attachment security. The prevailing philosophy was often one of shaping and controlling a child's behavior from the outside in, rather than nurturing their intrinsic development and emotional needs.
Here's where it gets really interesting and profoundly thought-provoking for us today. How did such advice, which seems so counter to modern understanding and frankly almost insane or even abusive to many of us, now become so widespread? How did it get accepted and even promoted as the best practice in its time?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It truly highlights how deeply ingrained cultural norms can be, how powerful expert authority can become, and how what's considered common sense or best practice in one era is anything but fixed.
Exactly.
It's a powerful reminder that our current practices, too, are culturally shaped, influenced by prevailing scientific theories, economic conditions, and societal anxieties, and are not necessarily universally applicable or eternally valid. It's a profound thought for anyone trying to navigate the complexities of parenting today, facing the seemingly endless stream of advice. That deep dive into the surprisingly varied and sometimes shocking historical parenting norms really sets the stage for our next section, which explores the cultural tapestry of childhood, how profoundly different societies have understood and treated children, and how that challenges our own assumptions about the right way to raise kids. Historically, anthropology, the very field meant to study human culture in all its diversity, often had a peculiar blind spot when it came to children. Can you elaborate on Helen Schwartzman's keen observation that anthropologists use children as a population of others? What did that othering truly mean in the context of academic research? And how did it affect how children's lives were studied, or rather, not studied?
It's an astute observation by Helen Schwartzman, and it truly highlights a significant oversight in early anthropological inquiry. What's fascinating here is how the discipline, despite its noble aim to understand human experience holistically across diverse cultures, frequently relegated children to a secondary, almost instrumental role in its initial studies. Schwartzman, in her critical assessment, observed that anthropologists often use children as a population of others to facilitate the investigation of a range of topics, rather than truly viewing them as a legitimate topic of research in their own right.
So use them as a tool, almost.
In a way, yes. This othering manifested in several ways. Instead of exploring children's own perspectives, their unique social systems, their agency within a culture, or their distinct contributions to community life, they became mere data points. They were often utilized as convenient illustrations to support broader theories about adult society, cultural transmission, or even, disturbingly, to reinforce problematic racial or evolutionary typologies of humanity. Imagine studying a community and only seeing the children as future adults or as reflections of adult behaviors rather than recognizing their current lived experiences, their games, their rituals, and their unique forms of social organization as valid subjects of study themselves.
Right, focusing only on how they become adults.
Precisely. Their experiences were largely filtered through adult interpretations or utilized as proxies for understanding something else entirely, preventing a true child-centered understanding of their lives. The predominant focus was on how children became socialized adults, not on childhood itself as a distinct, culturally significant and valuable stage of human existence with its own intrinsic meaning. This approach perpetuated a biased and incomplete understanding of human social life.
That's a powerful distinction. Children as instrumental others rather than subjects in their own right. It almost feels like a scientific form of dismissal. Can you give us an even more concrete, perhaps even jarring example of this othering and how these early anthropological perspectives disturbingly linked child development to broader, often discriminatory theories about different races or groups of people? It sounds like it was tied to some truly problematic and harmful ideas, which are crucial for us to acknowledge, not to endorse, but to understand the historical context.
Indeed, it's vital to confront these historical examples head-on, not to condone them, but to understand the trajectory of thought and why modern anthropology so vehemently rejects such frameworks. A particularly stark and ethically troubling example comes from the 1878 work The Evolution of Morality by C. Stanley Wake. He attempted to trace what he called 5 stages of moral development in humanity. He termed them the selfish, the willful, the emotional, the empirical, and the rational.
5 stages of morality.
Right?
Okay.
What's absolutely critical to understand, and what modern anthropology unequivocally rejects, is how Wake disturbingly linked these purported stages not only to a child's individual development from infancy to adulthood, but also, incredibly, to particular groups of people who represented different developmental states of the human race.
Oh, no.
Yes, this was a deeply flawed, pseudoscientific attempt to create a hierarchical ladder of human moral progress, with European societies at the pinnacle and other cultures positioned at lower, primitive stages.
So explicitly racist.
Explicitly. For instance, Wake posited that the first stage, pure selfishness, characterized by an entire absence of moral principle and a disposition which seeks its sole satisfaction in the gratification of the passions, was evident in both infants and, disgracefully, in Australian Aborigines, whom he painted as utterly devoid of complex moral reasoning. Moving to the third stage, the emotional period, which he claimed emerged in children after puberty, he explicitly mirrored this developmental phase with the Negro race. He characterized this group, according to his biases, as a creature of passion, which leads him to abandon himself to sexual excesses and an indulgence in intoxication. He has a disregard for human life, and when his passions are aroused, he is utterly careless about inflicting pain.
That's horrifying.
It is. While he grudgingly acknowledged that education might have a restraining effect on the European young man, he chillingly asserted that, subjectively, the youthful phase of the civilized mind is exactly similar to that which is observed among the Negroes as a race. This horrifyingly illustrates how early anthropological thought was intertwined with and utilized to justify racist typologies, effectively othering both children by seeing them as incomplete adults, and non-Western peoples by positioning them at lower stages of moral or human development, equating them with infantilism or base instincts. Let me be absolutely clear. It is paramount to note that this is a historical source viewpoint, detailing a past, deeply flawed and racist methodology within anthropology.
Right. Absolutely crucial context.
Modern anthropology unequivocally and strongly rejects such racist typologies and the colonial discriminatory frameworks from which they emerged. This is presented for historical context to understand the evolution of thought, not as an endorsed perspective. In direct, stark contrast, and as a crucial turning point for the discipline, we have the groundbreaking work of Franz Boas in 1911. Boas, considered a foundational figure in modern anthropology, vehemently challenged these fixed, deterministic notions of racial hierarchy and inherent stages of development. He emphasized instead the profound importance of environment and culture in shaping human beings. He suggested that the central nervous system continues to develop, longer perhaps than any other part of the body, which he inferred would mean it would be apt to show the most far-reaching influences of environment.
Okay, so environment shapes the nervous system itself.
That was his radical idea for the time. It directly implied that social and geographical environments significantly influence the adult body and, critically, the very development of the central nervous system itself. This perspective fundamentally moved anthropology away from fixed, inherent stages tied to race and towards an understanding development as shaped by dynamic environmental and cultural interactions. It laid the indispensable groundwork for more nuanced, respectful, and empirically sound cross-cultural studies of childhood and human variation. It was a paradigm shift that opened the door to recognizing the incredible diversity and validity of different developmental pathways.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, particularly Boas's emphasis on environment and culture profoundly shaping human development, how do these anthropological insights challenge our often held universal notions of good parenting? I'm thinking specifically about something as foundational as attachment theory, which in many Western contexts, particularly American, is often presented as a universal blueprint for healthy child development, almost a biological imperative. Do these cultural lenses show us something different?
That's an extremely important question, precisely because it forces us to reconsider what we often assume is a universal biological imperative or a singular correct pathway for healthy child development. Levine and Norman's 2001 research, for instance, directly challenged the presumed universality of Bowlby's attachment theory. While Bowlby's theory has been incredibly influential and valuable in understanding early relationships, its application often took American patterns of attachment characterized by high levels of parental responsiveness and immediate comfort-seeking as the global norm, implying that deviations from this norm were inherently insecure.
Right, the strange situation test and its classifications?
It's exactly. However, Levine and Norman's data from Germany, for example, revealed significant and valid cultural variations in caregiving practices and their outcomes. They found that German mothers placed a much higher cultural value on self-reliance and learning to play by themselves in their babies. Consequently, these mothers were less likely than American mothers to pick up a crying child simply because he or she wants attention. Their approach was geared towards fostering independence and emotional regulation from a younger age, which is a culturally valued trait in Germany.
Okay, so a different cultural goal leads to different parenting behavior.
Precisely. Now, if you were to strictly apply the American attachment classification system, these German infants, due to their mother's less immediate responsiveness to every cry, might indeed be classified as insecurely attached.
Yeah.
But to then jump to the conclusion that the majority of German parents are raising emotionally disturbed children is, as Levine and Norman rightly point out, a dubious conclusion.
Yeah, that seems like a huge leap.
It is, especially without a satisfactory alternative explanation that accounts for cultural context. It highlights that what is considered secure or healthy in terms of attachment or developmental outcomes can, in fact, be deeply culturally defined. It's not about one culture being better or worse at parenting. It's about differing cultural values shaping caregiving practices, which then produce different yet equally adaptive and healthy developmental pathways for children within their specific cultural contexts. The environment, as Bo has so powerfully suggested, profoundly shapes how children develop and what skills and traits are prioritized and nurtured. This concept is vital for anyone engaging with parenting advice today, as it encourages a critical, culturally aware perspective rather than a one-size-fits-all approach.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating the seemingly endless sea of parenting philosophies today? It seems like even what we consider common sense in parenting, like the immediate, constant responsiveness to every cry, can be deeply rooted in specific cultural assumptions, rather than some universal, immutable truth about child development. It truly puts into perspective the idea that there's one right way to parent, doesn't it?
It really does.
It suggests a humility in our approach and an openness to diverse methods.
Exactly, and that humility is crucial. This leads us seamlessly into perhaps one of the most significant and profound shifts in child-rearing practices over human history: the dramatic decline of communal child-rearing. For the vast majority of human history, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, children were not primarily raised in isolated nuclear family units. Instead, they were deeply embedded within blended communities, be they tribes, clans, or extended family networks, where the responsibility for children was far more distributed than it is in modern, individualized societies. The saying, "it takes a village," isn't just a quaint proverb. It was the prevailing reality.
The literal reality.
Absolutely. Observations from contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, which offer glimpses into modes of life that dominated human existence, vividly illustrate this. For example, studies of the Kung people in southern Africa and the Aka people in Central Africa reveal practices that stand in stark contrast to Western norms. Babies in these societies might spend as much as 93% of their daytime and virtually all of their nighttime in close physical contact with their mothers.
Wow, 93%.
Yeah, incredible closeness. However, and this is the crucial distinction, alloparenting, which refers to significant paternal and communal involvement in childcare by individuals other than the biological parents, is not merely an occasional help. It is a prevalent and necessary social norm.
Alloparenting. Okay, so care by others is normal and expected.
Exactly. Children are held, fed, and comforted by a wide array of caregivers, including fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and older siblings. This distributed care ensures that no single adult is burdened with the sole responsibility, fostering a sense of shared responsibility and collective investment in the next generation. Furthermore, children in these communal settings often gain considerable autonomy at a remarkably young age. For example, Aikeka children are observed making their own or shared houses by age 10 or 11.
10 or 11. Building houses.
Demonstrating levels of practical skill, self-sufficiency, and decision-making independence that are virtually unheard of in most Western contexts, where dependence often extends well into young adulthood. This distributed care and early autonomy reflect a fundamental difference in how childhood is structured, moving far beyond the sole, intense responsibility of biological parents. The collective raise the child, providing a rich, multifaceted environment for learning and growth.
Okay, that makes so much sense, and it's a stark contrast to modern Western societies, especially in urban areas. It feels like the entire burden of raising children now falls almost exclusively on nuclear parents,
It often does.
leading to that common, almost aching lament you hear everywhere. Where's my village?
We are so siloed in our family units. It seems like we've not only lost those informal communal networks, but also lack official support structures, things like widely available, truly free childcare, universal evidence-based parenting classes, or even recognized official roles for grandparents and extended family that are integrated into societal support systems. How does this tension between historical communal care and modern individualistic parenting manifest, particularly when parents are, ironically, craving that very community they seem to be losing or even pushing away? This raises an important question, and it's perhaps one of the most profound dilemmas in contemporary parenting. It creates a paradox that many struggle to resolve. On popular online platforms like Reddit, you frequently see parents discussing this inherent human need for children to have a safe nucleus, a secure home base provided by their parents. But they also acknowledge the undeniable benefit of children having more adult caregivers than their parents alone.
Right, they want the village.
They articulate a clear longing for that village, for the shared burdens, diverse influences, and communal wisdom that historically characterized child rearing. However, this deep-seated longing for community clashes directly with powerful modern anxieties. Primarily, there's a significant risk aversion that permeates current parenting culture. Parents express a hard time trusting a community with their children, fueled by pervasive fears about safety, stranger danger, the omnipresent awareness of rare but tragic child abduction cases, or simply concerns about negligence.
Understandable fears, though.
Absolutely valid fears, but they have consequences. Beyond physical safety, there's also the profound worry about exposing their children to different values that might contradict my values, leading to a desire for absolute control over every influence in their child's life. This hypervigilance, while stemming from love and a desire to protect, often comes at a cost. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle that often undermines the very community parents crave. Parents are, perhaps ironically, often praised for enforcing ridiculous boundaries with extended family members or other potential caregivers.
Like strict rules for grandparents?
Exactly. Prohibiting grandparents from giving certain foods, or dictating exactly how and when they can interact, or refusing to allow a child to stay overnight with trusted relatives, all driven by this intense desire for control and consistency. Yet these same parents then often complain about not having a village.
Ah, the paradox.
Precisely. There's a prevailing fear of not trusting any other adults, which, ironically, can lead children to internalize their parents' anxieties, potentially making them think the world is out to get them, or that only their parents are truly safe and trustworthy. This phenomenon has even been described by some as self-serving OIIMOB, obsessive individualism, and intrusive micromanagement of offspring by yourself.
OII Moby.
Catchy, if a bit pointed. It is pointed, but it encapsulates this trend. This intense, isolated approach, while seemingly protective, is seen by some as potentially debilitating social progress, creating an unsustainable burden on nuclear families and depriving children of diverse relational experiences vital for adaptability and broader social intelligence. It's a societal paradox where the perceived need for absolute control, driven by anxiety, actively undermines the very communal support structures that could alleviate that parental burden and profoundly benefit children.
This truly highlights a deep societal conflict. It raises an important question for all of us. How do we find a balance between fostering the nuclear family as a safe and secure base for children, providing that essential sense of security, while also reintegrating the undeniable benefits of a broader community for child rearing? And how do we navigate that crucial challenge while genuinely acknowledging valid, legitimate concerns about safety and the inevitable reality of differing values in a pluralistic society?
It's a huge challenge.
It seems like this isn't just about individual good choices anymore, but about fundamental societal structure, evolving cultural norms, and how we choose to live and raise the next generation in a complex world. It's about bridging that gap between the historical ideal and the practical realities of modern life. That profound discussion about the loss of the village and the escalating burden on the nuclear family brings us directly to a defining characteristic of our time: the double-edged sword of modernity. Specifically, the profound changes in daily life for children, particularly with the ubiquitous presence of technology, and our evolving understanding of routines. It's undeniable. Being a child today is fundamentally different than it was even a generation ago, largely due to screens. Can you detail how this screen revolution has impacted childhood, what that shift truly entails, and the sheer scale of this change?
The screen revolution has, without exaggeration, profoundly altered the very landscape of childhood. It's reshaped how children interact with their world, their peers, and even themselves. In the past, the presence of screens in a child's life was either non-existent or extremely limited. Entertainment predominantly came from tangible, real-world activities. Children engaged with books, board games, or simply playing outside for hours on end, building forts, exploring nature, or organizing elaborate games with neighborhood friends.
Yeah, I remember spending whole afternoons just outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Screen time, if it existed at all, was typically reserved for specific, brief periods like Saturday morning cartoons, a weekly family movie night, or perhaps a rare visit to an arcade. This fostered direct engagement with the physical world, encouraged imaginative play, and necessitated face-to-face social interaction. Today, however, the digital landscape is ubiquitous. It saturates almost every aspect of a child's life, from personal smartphones and tablets that are often handed to toddlers to sophisticated video games, streaming services, and social media platforms. Digital devices are ever-present and constantly accessible.
We really are everywhere.
And the sheer scale of this immersion is staggering. On average, children are now reported to spend over 7 hours a day on screens.
Just an hour, that's a full workday.
It is. That's a full working day or more dedicated to digital consumption and interaction. This pervasive digital immersion has profoundly changed how they interact with their surroundings and peers, shifting the primary mode of engagement from the physical to the virtual. This shift introduces a host of unique challenges that were significantly less prevalent, if at all, in previous generations. We now grapple with phenomena such as screen addiction, where children exhibit compulsive usage patterns, experiencing withdrawal symptoms when devices are removed. This addiction can impact attention spans, emotional regulation, and even disrupt crucial sleep patterns, creating a cycle of fatigue and irritability. Alongside this, there's the relentless academic pressure that often pushes children into highly structured, goal-oriented learning, sometimes facilitated by screens, further eroding free, unstructured time.
So it's addiction and pressure replacing play.
In many cases, yes. It's crucial, as sources suggest, to recognize the urgency to preserve the timeless joys of play, exploration, and connection, which are being increasingly displaced by digital engagement. The European Parliament, acknowledging the gravity of this digital immersion, has even highlighted specific online risks associated with children's extensive screen use. These include exposure to harmful content, such as content promoting eating disorders, self-harm, or hate speech, experiences of hateful behavior, cyberbullying, online harassment.
Which seems rampant online.
Indeed. Plus, aggressive commercial profiling, where children's data is surreptitiously collected and used for targeted advertising, often without their full comprehension or parental consent, and the insidious spread of disinformation. These aren't just minor annoyances. They are significant threats to a child's mental health, their developing sense of identity, and their fundamental ability to discern truth from falsehood. The Parliament emphasizes a pressing need for enhanced media literacy education for children and for robust, supportive family or peer environments to help them navigate these complex and often perilous digital landscapes safely and critically. Ultimately, this isn't merely a change in pastime. It's a fundamental reshaping of how children develop, learn, and interact with the world around them, demanding a conscious and strategic response from parents and society alike.
That's a truly concerning picture. It sounds like the consequences of this pervasive digital immersion go far beyond just more screen time.
Right.
What are the direct developmental and well-being consequences for children when so much of their time is spent in this digital realm, especially when compared to the activities that were typical for children in previous generations?
The consequences are indeed multifaceted and impact various critical domains of a child's development, creating a kind of cascade effect. Firstly, and most fundamentally, this shift has profoundly changed how they interact with their surroundings and peers. When children spend upwards of 7 hours a day on screens, it inherently and drastically reduces the time available for real-world, unstructured play, for crucial face-to-face social interactions, and for vital physical exploration of their environment.
The things they aren't doing.
Exactly. These are the very activities that are essential for developing nuanced social skills, like reading nonverbal cues, practicing empathy, or negotiating conflicts directly, as well as fostering creativity, cultivating problem-solving abilities in dynamic situations, and refining gross and fine motor skills through physical activity. This reduction in real-world engagement can lead to a sense of social isolation, even if children are connecting online, as digital connections often lack the depth and complexity of in-person relationships. Secondly, as I mentioned, modern childhood faces unique challenges, such as screen addiction and academic pressure, which were far less prevalent in the past. Screen addiction, much like other behavioral addictions, can directly impact attention spans, making it harder for children to sustain focus on non-digital tasks or tolerate boredom.
Right, that constant need for stimulation.
Mhm. It can also impair emotional regulation, as children become accustomed to immediate gratification and struggle with delayed rewards or uncomfortable feelings. Moreover, it can severely disrupt sleep patterns, a cornerstone of healthy development, leading to chronic fatigue, irritability, and difficulties with learning and mood. The constant rapid-fire stimulation and instant gratification offered by screens can make it increasingly difficult for children to engage with activities that require sustained attention, patience, or the ability to generate their own entertainment. The intertwining of intense academic pressure with pervasive screen time further complicates this. Children are often overscheduled, with less and less free time to simply be children. The European Parliament, in its thorough examination of social media's influence on children, again highlights those specific online risks. Harmful content, hateful behavior, aggressive commercial profiling, and the insidious spread of disinformation.
It's a minefield, really.
It can be. And these risks can profoundly impact a child's worldview and critical thinking skills. The Parliament stresses the critical need for robust media literacy education and supportive environments to help them navigate this safely and critically. Ultimately, the profound challenge is to preserve the timeless joys of play, exploration, and connection, those deeply human, essential developmental pathways, while adapting to a digitally saturated world. The constant input and the often structured, passive nature of much online interaction often subtly but significantly rob children of what developmental psychologist David Elkin calls the gift of boredom.
The gift of boredom, that phrase really struck me before.
It's powerful, isn't it? And as we'll discuss further, it is absolutely vital for creativity, self-directed learning, and the cultivation of internal resources.
It makes me reflect on how structured our lives, and especially our children's lives, have become. We've heard so much about how important routines are for children, how they create stability and predictability. What does the research actually say about the benefits of routines for children, especially young ones? Is it all about strict, minute-by-minute schedules, or is there a nuance to it, perhaps a point where it can become too rigid?
Routines are indeed crucial, and the research strongly supports their benefits for children's development and well-being. For young children, predictability is absolutely key to their emotional and cognitive security. When children know what to expect, when certain activities will occur, and what the sequence of their day looks like, it helps them feel safe and secure. The sense of safety reduces anxiety and builds confidence, allowing them to relax into their environment and explore without constant apprehension. Simultaneously, a predictable routine allows them to practice autonomy within a defined framework. They can anticipate transitions, make choices within the structure, and gradually take ownership of their own actions, fostering a sense of capability and self-efficacy.
So it's security and autonomy. Interesting combination.
Exactly. A particularly compelling study conducted during the tumultuous COVID-19 pandemic vividly illustrated the protective power of routines. It found that maintaining a structured, predictable home environment by adherence to family routines appears to mitigate elevated depressive and externalizing symptoms in preschoolers. This protective effect was remarkably robust, persisting even after accounting for significant stressors that families faced during the pandemic, like changes in income, parental stress, food insecurity.
Even with all that chaos outside, routine inside helped.
Significantly. What's more, this was observed as a dose-dependent relationship, meaning the more consistently and reliably routines were implemented, the better the outcomes for the children's mental health and emotional stability. This research underscores that routines aren't just about convenience for parents or making life easier. They have a direct, measurable, positive impact on a child's emotional well-being, their sense of control, and their ability to cope with external stressors. They provide a predictable scaffolding upon which healthy development can occur.
So routines are clearly beneficial, and there's strong evidence for their positive impact on children's mental health, especially in times of stress. But on the flip side, what about the potential downsides? Is there a point where routines can become too much? Can a rigid, inflexible adherence to a packed schedule or an overabundance of structured activities actually become detrimental to a child's development rather than beneficial? perhaps stifling creativity or independent thought?
Absolutely. This is precisely where the nuance of routines becomes critical. While routine unquestionably brings a sense of security and builds confidence for children, that predictable rhythm that anchors their day, too much routine, or rigid, inflexible adherence to it, can indeed become tedious and dull. Imagine a child's day so tightly scheduled that there's no room for spontaneity, for following a sudden curiosity, or for simply being. This can stifle creativity and intrinsic motivation.
Like squeezing the life out of it.
Exactly. On the other end of the spectrum, too much novelty, too much unpredictability can be equally problematic, leading to environments that are confusing and chaotic, causing anxiety and making it difficult for children to feel secure or learn self-regulation. Brain research provides valuable insight here, confirming this delicate balance. It tells us explicitly that brains need both routine and novelty to grow optimally. The ideal optimal state for learning and healthy development is described as relaxed alertness.
Relaxed alertness. I like that.
It's a great description. It isn't a state of high stress or extreme relaxation, but rather an engaged yet calm state, which is achieved precisely through a healthy balance between predictable, consistent routines and stimulating novel experiences. It's the sweet spot where the brain feels safe enough to explore and integrate new information without being overwhelmed. We see this balance beautifully implemented in well-designed early childhood environments. For example, some progressive daycares intentionally balance structured activities with periods of free exploration. They might have a 30-minute block of intentional structured play, perhaps a guided art project, or a specific learning game followed immediately by 30 minutes of completely free play.
Where the kids call the shots.
Exactly, where children can choose their activities, interact as they wish, and direct their own learning. This ensures children benefit from both guided instruction and self-directed exploration, allowing for both skill acquisition and the development of creativity and social skills. A systemic review spanning over 70 years of studies on routines, from infancy through adolescence, further solidified this nuanced understanding. It concluded that routines with some flexibility are overwhelmingly a net benefit for most families, contributing positively to various developmental outcomes. However, it explicitly stated a crucial caveat. Rigid adherence to a routine and the stress that comes with it are not beneficial.
So flexibility is the key ingredient.
It truly seems to be. This highlights that the quality and flexibility of the routine are as important as its mere existence. An overly packed, inflexible schedule, one often driven more by parental anxiety or external pressure to optimize every minute rather than genuine child need, can inadvertently rob children of precious downtime, inhibit spontaneous play, and potentially lead to stress, emotional exhaustion, and even early burnout, rather than fostering resilience or creativity. The goal isn't control, but gentle guidance and predictable structure. This perfectly ties into a pattern that many parents and careful observers of modern family life are recognizing. Parental anxiety, often subtly disguised as what they perceive or present as good choices for their children. It's a compelling point of tension in contemporary parenting. What does this look like in daily life? How does this deep-seated anxiety manifest in parenting decisions? And what kind of impact does it have on the family dynamic, particularly on the children themselves? This pattern is indeed becoming increasingly prevalent, almost endemic, and it represents a significant concern in the broader landscape of childhood. This anxiety disguised as good choices manifests in several identifiable and often extreme ways, born out of a profound desire for control and a fear of negative outcomes. Firstly, we often see extreme dietary restrictions for kids. Parents might insist on a diet with no sugar, no gluten, even without a medical diagnosis, only organic, non-GMO produce, or a host of other highly specific and often burdensome food rules.
Yeah, you hear about that a lot.
While some restrictions may be medically necessary, the prevalence of these often stems from a deep-seated fear of perceived harm from conventional foods, or an attempt to achieve optimal health through absolute control, sometimes without sufficient scientific basis. This can turn mealtimes into battlegrounds and foster unhealthy relationships with food. Secondly, there's a distinct hyper-focus on milestones, enrichment, or achievement.
The achievement culture.
Exactly. This translates into a relentless schedule of activities. Soccer practice multiple times a week, piano lessons, martial arts, gymnastics, ballet, tutoring, and rigidly scheduled playdates. The motivation here often subtly shifts from genuine interest or developmental benefit to a deep-seated fear of the child falling behind, not being the best, or missing an opportunity to gain a competitive edge in an increasingly competitive world. Every minute becomes an opportunity for enrichment, leaving little room for unstructured play or simple downtime. Perhaps most acutely, and this loops back to our earlier discussion, it manifests in rigid routines that feel more about the parent's comfort than the child's needs. While routines are good, as we discussed, when they become inflexible and dictated by adult anxieties, for example, absolute silence during nap time that makes parents prisoners in their own homes, or strict feeding schedules that ignore a child's hunger cues, they lose their developmental benefit and become a source of stress.
Right, the routine becomes the master.
Precisely. Online discussions, particularly on platforms like Reddit, vividly highlight this tension. Parents are seen enforcing ridiculous boundaries with extended family or other potential caregivers, refusing visits because of a slight deviation from routine, or demanding specific protocols from grandparents, only to then, paradoxically, complain about not having a village.
There's that paradox again.
It comes up repeatedly. This stems from a pervasive fear of not trusting any other adults with their child, often amplified by sensationalized news or social media. This hypervigilance and intense need for control, while seemingly protective and well-intentioned, can inadvertently isolate the nuclear family and stifle a child's natural exploratory drive, limiting their exposure to diverse experiences and relationships.
That makes so much sense. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of isolation, driven by anxiety. So, what are the broader long-term consequences of this kind of overparenting? This anxiety-driven approach manifested in overscheduling, overcontrolling, and a general too much approach. What does it truly do to the children themselves? Their ability to navigate the world as they grow up, to develop resilience, and to cultivate their own sense of self.
The consequences of this overparenting are indeed significant and concerning for a child's long-term development and mental well-being. The core concern, articulated by many experts, is that anxious parents make anxious adults.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. Children raised in an environment of hyper-control and constant management often lack the crucial opportunities to develop their own coping mechanisms, problem-solving skills, and self-efficacy. These overscheduled, over-controlled kids may grow up lagging the bandwidth to deal with real-life situations because mommy never let him engage with different people or navigate minor setbacks independently. They miss out on vital learning experiences that come from making mistakes, resolving conflicts with peers on their own terms, or interacting with a variety of personalities and viewpoints outside the tightly controlled family unit. This can lead to a reduced capacity for independent functioning and a heightened vulnerability to anxiety later in life.
So good intentions leading to potentially poor outcomes.
Potentially, yes. Developmental psychologist David Elkind, a keen and influential observer of modern childhood, has eloquently articulated this shift. He notes a profound reduction in unstructured time, stating that kids have lost more than 12 hours of free time per week in the last 2 decades.
12 hours a week, that's huge.
It's a massive reduction, and it means a significant decrease in opportunities for free play, which is absolutely vital for creativity, self-directed learning, and emotional processing. When every minute is scheduled, children have no time to simply be, to reflect, to imagine, or to process their experiences. Even preschools, traditionally bastions of play-based learning, have become increasingly intellectually oriented, often at the expense of spontaneous play. Furthermore, many schools, driven by testing pressures, have regrettably eliminated recess, further stripping away spontaneous, unguided activity from a child's day.
Taking away recess, it seems so counterproductive.
Many would agree. Elkin refers to this relentless pressure and lack of downtime as a war on childhood, characterized by too much stuff, too many choices, too much information, and too much speed. This constant barrage of stimulation, external direction, and lack of downtime effectively robs kids of the gift of boredom. And boredom, paradoxically, is a critical ingredient for healthy development. When children are forced to confront boredom, they are compelled to invent their own entertainment, to explore their inner worlds, to develop planning strategies, to problem-solve creatively, and to cultivate flexibility in their thinking. Without this gift, children can become overwhelmed, perpetually stressed, and even experience early burnout, impacting not just their creativity but their long-term mental health. They may struggle to self-regulate, to engage and sustain focus, or to cope with the natural uncertainties of life, because they've always had an external structure or a screen to fill every void.
So that paints a challenging picture of modern childhood. Given these pervasive pressures and the potential for overparenting to hinder development, what does this all mean for you, the listener? For someone trying to raise resilient, well-adjusted children in this often overwhelming, anxiety-driven environment, how can parents effectively counteract these powerful societal currents and simplify childhood in a way that truly allows their kids to thrive? cultivating that inner strength and creativity?
It suggests a critical reevaluation of priorities, a conscious and deliberate shift away from the more is better mentality that often pervades modern parenting. Simplifying childhood, which means intentionally and strategically limiting exposure to excess, actively fostering ample opportunities for free, unstructured play, and crucially, allowing for and even embracing moments of boredom can actually serve as a powerful protective factor against potential mental health issues.
So less can actually be more.
In this context, very much so. While too much isn't presented as the sole cause of complex conditions like ADHD, the sources clearly indicate it can certainly overwhelm healthy children and contribute significantly to stress, anxiety, and early burnout. The goal is to create an environment where children aren't constantly stimulated, directed, or entertained, allowing their developing brains the necessary space to cultivate self-regulation, intrinsic motivation, and genuine creativity from within. We're observing a heartening trend where many parents, particularly in online communities like Reddit, are actively embracing this countercultural approach. They prioritize teaching practical life skills early, recognizing these as fundamental building blocks for independence and competence.
Like cooking or chores.
Exactly. Imagine a 6-year-old making scrambled eggs all on her own, or a 7-year-old taking over the responsibility of mowing the lawn, or a teenager confidently managing a household budget. These parents see such activities not as chores to be avoided, but as essential lessons in capability and responsibility, viewing it as directly preparing their kid for life, rather than merely engaging in an endless pursuit of academic accolades or athletic prowess. This goes hand in hand with the profound and increasingly recognized philosophy that children are people, not property.
People, not property. Explain that a bit more.
Well, while the ultimate decision-making power regarding a child's fundamental well-being, safety, and core values should largely rest with parents, the underlying philosophy suggests that the traditional notions of parental authority or child ownership should by and large be abolished. It advocates for a relationship built on respect, guidance, and the gradual empowering transfer of responsibility, rather than absolute control or a top-down authoritarian approach. It's about nurturing their inherent capacity for independence and self-reliance, recognizing that true resilience comes not from being shielded from every challenge, but from being equipped to navigate them with confidence and capability.
That brings us perfectly to the absolutely crucial topic of cultivating resilience in children, especially in our incredibly complex and unpredictable modern world. It's a term we hear a lot, often used interchangeably with bouncing back. But what exactly is resilience? Is it just about immediate recovery from hardship? Or is there a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of what it truly means for a child to be resilient, to not just survive, but to thrive amidst challenges?
That's an excellent point to clarify, because the common understanding of resilience often oversimplifies it. Resilience isn't merely about bouncing back from adversity, although that is certainly a vital component. More comprehensively, it encompasses the ability to acquire comprehensive knowledge and display particular skills, incrementally building a person's capacity to handle various situations and gain self-efficacy.
So it's about building capacity over time.
Precisely. It's a dynamic, ongoing process of development, not just a static trait that someone either possesses or doesn't. This means it involves continuous learning, adapting to new circumstances, and growing stronger through challenges, rather than simply returning to a previous state. It's about adaptation, learning, and developing new strengths. Critically, resilience is also deeply linked to mental health, and it's important to understand what we mean by mental health in this context. It's defined broadly as encompassing the enjoyment of life, ability to cope with stress and sadness, the fulfillment of goals and potential, and a sense of connection to others.
Okay, so it's much broader than just coping.
Much broader. So, a truly resilient child isn't just one who can endure hardship or withstand pressure. They're also a child who can continue to experience joy, effectively manage their emotions, both positive and negative, pursue their goals, and realize their potential. And crucially, maintain meaningful connections with others, even when faced with difficulties, disappointments, or significant stressors. It's about a holistic well-being that allows them to navigate the ups and downs of life effectively, with a sense of purpose and connection. This broader definition highlights that resilience is foundational to a child's overall thriving, not just their survival.
Given that comprehensive definition, which clearly goes beyond just toughness, what are the primary challenges to children's resilience in today's environment, especially when we consider the too much problem we discussed earlier? And equally important, what are the crucial factors that parents and caregivers need to focus on to effectively build this kind of deep, robust resilience within their children?
A significant and insidious challenge to children's resilience in today's world is what developmental science terms toxic stress.
Toxic stress. That sounds serious.
It is. This is not the everyday manageable stress that helps us grow and adapt. Rather, it's defined as strong, frequent, and/or prolonged adversity that occurs without adequate adult support. Think of situations like persistent neglect, chronic abuse, severe parental mental illness, or prolonged exposure to violence without any buffering protective relationships. Unlike typical stress, which can be tolerated and even build coping skills, toxic stress can literally disrupt a child's developing brain architecture and body systems.
It actually changes the brain.
It can, yes, leading to long-term negative impacts on their physical and mental health, affecting everything from their immune system to their capacity for emotional regulation. This underscores why having supportive relationships, both within and outside the immediate nuclear family, is critical to children's resilience. These relationships with responsive parents, caring grandparents, supportive teachers, or trusted mentors provide the buffering effect that turns potentially toxic stress into tolerable stress.
The buffer is key.
Absolutely. They offer a safe base, a source of comfort, and a model for coping. It's the consistent presence of at least one stable, caring adult that acts as a protective shield against overwhelming adversity. To effectively build this robust, multifaceted resilience, the focus needs to be multifaceted itself, addressing both the child's internal capabilities and the quality of their external environment. The key factors that research consistently points to include, first, enhancing parenting skills, equipping parents with the knowledge and tools for responsive, autonomy supportive care. Second, strengthening family relationships and connectedness, fostering strong bonds, open communication, and a sense of belonging within the family unit. Third, improving coping and social skills in the child, directly teaching children how to manage their emotions, resolve conflicts, and interact effectively with others.
So teaching them the skills directly.
Yes. Fourth, promoting healthy thinking habits, helping children develop optimistic outlooks, problem-solving mindsets, and the ability to reframe negative experiences constructively. And fifth, creating opportunities for personal challenge, allowing children to face and overcome appropriate difficulties, which builds a sense of mastery and self-efficacy, knowing they can indeed handle tough situations. It's about empowering children with both the internal tools like emotional regulation and problem solving, and the external support systems they need to navigate life's inevitable difficulties, helping them to develop not just strength, but adaptability, critical thinking, and a profound sense of self-worth. This is a collaborative, ongoing effort between the child, their immediate family, and the wider community, recognizing that a resilient child is often a product of a supportive and nurturing ecosystem.
So that provides a clear roadmap for cultivating resilience. It sounds like a complex but achievable goal. How can we, as parents and caregivers, actually put these principles into practice in our daily lives? What are some concrete, practical strategies that empower children, moving us away from overparenting and truly helping them develop genuine resilience and autonomy from a young age?
It's truly about shifting from that do-for-them mentality, where parents smooth every path and solve every problem, to a guide-them approach, where even in everyday tasks and emotional challenges, children are given the space and tools to figure things out, make choices, and experience the natural consequences of their actions. This fosters a profound sense of agency and capability from a young age. Practical strategies revolve around empowering children through autonomy and responsibility, starting with emotional intelligence. This means, firstly, allowing them to experience their emotions. Instead of immediately dismissing a child's sadness, anger, or frustration with phrases like "don't cry" or "it's not a big deal," acknowledge how they feel.
Validate the feeling first.
Exactly. Use phrases like, "I see you're really upset about that," or "it's okay to feel angry." Then, help them verbalize those feelings, perhaps by giving them words if they don't have them. Are you feeling frustrated because the blocks won't stack? This teaches emotional literacy and helps them begin to self-regulate. Secondly, listening attentively when they speak about worries or problems without immediately jumping in with solutions or dismissing their concerns.
Just listen.
Yes. This validates their experiences, shows them they are heard, and encourages open communication. Ask open-ended questions like, "Tell me more about that," or "What happened next?" Thirdly, when children experience a difficult situation or problem, instead of immediately fixing it, asking them how they want support, rather than imposing your own help or solutions. For example, "This seems hard. What do you think would help?" Or, "Would you like me to just listen, or do you want ideas?" This promotes self-advocacy and helps them develop their own problem-solving muscles.
Putting them in the driver's seat of finding help.
Precisely. Fourthly, and building on that, actively helping them develop their own strategies and solutions for problems. For example, if a child feels left out of a friendship group, instead of calling the other parents, brainstorm with them about their ideas for handling it. What could you say to them? Who else might help you in this situation? What are some different ways you could approach this? This directly builds problem-solving skills, critical thinking, and a sense of control over their own lives. Fifth, it can be incredibly helpful to encourage experiencing failure rather than protecting them from it.
Letting them fail sometimes, that's hard for parents.
It is hard, but crucial. When they do fail, perhaps they didn't win the game or their art project didn't turn out as planned, guide them to put the failure into perspective. Help them understand that failure is a part of learning, not a reflection of their inherent worth. Ask, what did you learn from this? Or what might you try differently next time? This helps them learn from mistakes without being overwhelmed or demoralized by them, building resilience and a growth mindset. Finally, suggesting more helpful self-talk to reframe negative thoughts. Children, like adults, can get stuck in negative internal narratives. If a child says, "I'm going to die of embarrassment speaking in front of my class," help them reframe it to a more realistic and empowering thought like, "Public speaking isn't my favorite thing, and I might feel nervous, but I'll be able to cope and get through it."
Teaching them to challenge their own negative thoughts.
Exactly. It teaches cognitive reframing, a vital skill for managing anxiety and building emotional strength. Beyond these interpersonal strategies, there's the broader importance of fostering executive function, EF skills. These are a set of cognitive skills including planning, working memory, inhibitory control or self-control, and cognitive flexibility that are absolutely vital for school success, self-regulation, and navigating complex situations, particularly important for children in high-risk environments.
Executive function.
Yeah.
Okay. How do parents foster that?
Parents can promote EF through autonomy-supportive parenting practices, which means providing choices whenever appropriate, allowing children to make decisions within reasonable boundaries, and offering opportunities for independent action. It also involves sensitive caregiving that shields children from excessive chaos and unpredictability, providing a stable, predictable environment without being overly rigid. Even early childhood programs like Head Start classrooms successfully build EF skills through clear, consistent rules and routines and actively redirecting or rewarding appropriate behavior, all within a nurturing context.
It truly sounds like a fundamental shift, moving from a do-for-them mentality, where parents smooth every path and solve every problem, to a guide-them mentality, where even in everyday tasks, children are given the space and tools to figure things out, make choices, and experience the natural consequences of their actions. It's about empowering them to become active participants in their own lives, not just passive recipients of care.
Exactly. It's about truly preparing them for life, not just for childhood, which is inherently temporary. We're seeing more and more parents embracing this idea, recognizing that fostering practical skills early is a profound act of empowerment. Parents who teach their kids practical skills from a young age, like that 6-year-old making scrambled eggs, or the 7-year-old mowing the lawn, or a 10-year-old competently doing their own laundry and packing their lunch, are, as one insightful parent put it, directly preparing their kid for life.
Building real competence.
Yes, this isn't about overburdening them. It's about gradually building competence and confidence. This ties into the profound and increasingly vocal idea that children are fundamentally people, not property. While the ultimate decision-making power regarding a child's fundamental well-being, safety, and core values should, by necessity, largely rest with parents, the underlying philosophy suggests that the traditional notions of parental authority or child ownership should by and large be abolished. This perspective encourages a relationship built on mutual respect, collaborative guidance, and the gradual empowering transfer of responsibility and autonomy, rather than absolute control or a top-down authoritarian dynamic. It's about nurturing their inherent capacity for independence and self-reliance, which ultimately cultivates true, lasting resilience, equipping them to thrive in an unpredictable world.
What an incredible journey we've taken through the ever-changing, surprising, and often paradoxical landscape of childhood and parenting. We've seen how concepts of care, discipline, and development are far from static universals. Instead, they're deeply woven into intricate historical contexts, shifting cultural beliefs, and evolving societal structures. From the ancient practices of salting babies and on-demand breastfeeding to the strict routines and even spanking advice of the mid-20th century, to our contemporary debates over screen time, highly structured schedules, and the subtle anxieties that often drive our good choices, what's undeniably clear is that the right way to raise a child is always in flux.
Constantly changing.
It's a dynamic process, influenced by everything from prevailing economic conditions and dominant philosophical movements to rapid technological advancements and our continuously evolving understanding of child psychology and neuroscience. There is no single timeless blueprint. Considering this incredible evolution and the constant pendulum swing of advice, here's a provocative thought for you to carry forward, to mull over, and perhaps even integrate into your own understanding of this vital human experience. What foundational elements from this deep dive, perhaps the hunter gatherer's emphasis on free play and broad communal support, or the proven benefits of consistent yet flexible routines that balance predictability with novelty, or even the profound understanding that boredom can be a catalyst for creativity? What can you intentionally integrate into your own approach to parenting, or simply your understanding of childhood? How can these insights help us to cultivate a childhood for our own children or for the next generation generally that truly balances security, autonomy, and the inherent capacity to thrive, not just survive, in an increasingly complex and unpredictable world? Thank you for diving deep with us.